Welcome to the Prison Pod YouTube series. On the phone, I have Kevin Tran. I became familiar with Kevin through Marc Vahanian and Pathway to Kinship. Mark spoke highly of Kevin and his dedication and hard work and suggested we talk with him. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I would like you to start by telling people where you are right now.
I'm a resident here in California at Corcoran State Prison.
And how long have you been there?
I've been here at Corcoran State Prison for 6 years, but my entire time of incarceration, I've been incarcerated since 2011.
Okay. I was wondering if you would tell us a little bit about your life before you came to prison.
Well, my life before prison, if I had to sum it up in 2 words, it would be abusive and chaotic. And that both reflects my upbringing and my life as an adult.
I was wondering how, did you attend school very long, or did you leave school at an early age?
No, so actually, if I was to go back in history, I was an honor student, and I decided to drop out of high school and abandon scholarships, actually, to a couple of universities.
And how about your education while you've been there?
Since I've been incarcerated, I have received my high school, essentially my GED, and I've also earned an associate's degree in sociology, and I began working on my bachelor's.
That's why Mark hooked us up, because I'm a sociologist and I love anything to do with sociology, which you probably really enjoy that area of study because, as you know, it's all about what makes us tick.
Yes, I do.
Are you thinking of doing your bachelor's in sociology?
I did begin my bachelor's education in sociology with an emphasis in criminal justice, but it just became unaffordable given the amount of money that I make in prison.
Right. Yeah, there's education is overwhelming anyways, and in prison it almost seems unattainable.
What I've done is that, I was actually through my community college receiving my associate's degree. I was inducted into a fraternity and an honor society called Phi Theta Kappa. And over the years, they have tried to help me, petition and do some grant writing. But I think as me being an incarcerated person trying to compete with members of free society, it's hard for investors to want to put money towards me.
So the programming there at the prison, is there a lot of programs there available and work programs, or is it one of those facilities that there's a lot of dead time?
No, California in around 2017 really had kind of a reversal in their idea of incarceration, and they started investing a lot more money into positive programming. And so here at Corcoran, there is jobs available. There's industry jobs such as working in a warehouse, learning janitorial services for like a hospital environment. There's vocational training for computers and electrical. There's a lot of self-help programs and therapeutic groups also.
Have you had a program that you particularly liked that you've participated in?
I think probably the most impactful program that I've ever did was called Criminon, and it was a correspondence course that I began working in about 2014 and have remained since with.
Is it similar to like Al-Anon, or Like a 12-step program?
Well, well, it's not really a 12-step program. So, Criminon was developed by L. Ron Hubbard, who a lot of people know is related to Scientology, the
Yeah.
founder of Scientology. But in his early career, he was actually a special officer for the LAPD, for the Los Angeles Police Department. And he kind of realized that, incarceration was a revolving door. So he developed this program, Criminon, to try to stop recidivism.
I'm going to have to look some more information up of that because I hadn't heard of that. So thank you for mentioning that.
And from my understanding, it's also available here in the West Coast and the East Coast.
Oh, okay, great. So in the facilities it's available?
Yes, so it's mainly done through correspondence. So the organization Criminon will, assign sponsors to anyone that wants to write to them and seek the program.
Okay, great. For the listeners, I will add information about that in our YouTube script so you can find out more for yourselves about that. How did you meet Mark Vahanian?
So I actually was. This is a kind of a unique story. This was about in 2022, and Mr. Vahanian was assisting Sister Mary with another organization called Partnership for Reentry Program called PrEP. And Mark came in as a guest and was speaking to, he was connected with through Sister Mary with my former cellmate, who was also a lifer, named Justin Ennis. And
this call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Well, I apologize for your listeners with that. But Mr. Vahanian wanted to try to open up a discussion forum because he saw that incarcerated people during the COVID pandemic did not have access to a lot of programs. We were social distancing and we were locked down. Mark came in, connected with my former cellmate, Justin Ennis, who then selected me to help facilitate this workshop. And so it was upon chance that I met Mr. Vahanian.
Well, that's really interesting because I forgot that you and Justin had known each other, and I had spoken with Justin a few months back. And for our listeners, Justin is now home. He is no longer incarcerated.
Yes.
So I never like to ask this, Kevin. This is one of those things that I just avoid asking. But is there a possibility of you having parole?
So my situation was I was sentenced to 52 years to life for kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, and false imprisonment. Fortunately, and my victim survived. And I won't name him because, for the sake of privacy.
Yeah.
But so when I was first incarcerated, my earliest chance of parole, I would have been in my mid-70s. And then in 2017, legislation was passed that allowed the department to offer what they call elderly parole, which then gave me a chance of parole at 60 years old. And then recent changes in 2022, more regulatory changes, would allow me to have parole at the age of 50. So, yes, I do have a chance of parole, and it's about 9 years away.
That's excellent. I just had this conversation with a former warden the other day about some of these long, extensive sentences that happen. And I think, especially when somebody is young, and when I say young, under 27, 25, when somebody is that young, that we really need to look at the sentencing. That type of a sentence, especially when somebody goes into the prison system and continuously works on programming and getting healthy physically and mentally, sometimes leaving gangs. There's so many things that happen once they get into the system if they do accept the programming and help that is available. Not that it's going to answer all the problems, but It does make such a difference. And I think that those sentences should be relooked at. I don't know when that should happen. Some people say 20 years. I think maybe less than that. So I'm really glad to see how progressive California has been with that, because I've had the opportunity to talk to a few people that have come out that had life without parole sentences. And it's really great to be able to see them come home. And they've learned so much while they've been in there and are great members of society. So what has been going on to prepare you to go home since you've been there?
Well, so a lot of things have prepared me for prison, and I think that it's strange to say this, but my criminality actually helped me prepare for prison. And so when I initially came, I was coming up from county jail and I was sentenced to 52 years of life. There were other individuals that were telling me, Kevin, you would never get out. You have a life sentence. It's over. It's time to just, get the outside world and just think of how you're going to survive in prison. Well, I was already distrustful and suspicious of people in general, and that was just part of due to my character defects. And so I didn't believe what these people were saying. And I told myself, well, I'm going to find a way out. And I hate to admit this, but at the time, I wasn't thinking about, reforming or changing. I essentially had the mindset is I'm going to fake it until I make it. And so I started taking programs almost immediately when I came into prison. I started doing like voluntary programs inside the cell. I received my GED. And in the process of doing that, I actually impressed my teacher at the time, who then hired me as his clerk because how fast I was able to receive my GED. And so I started just, mentoring and tutoring other students and helping them be able to achieve their GED, which then the administration or officers from the administration saw my ability to do so, and they hired me as a clerk. And I was clerking under the captain. And when I got to that environment, I started meeting these other lifers who were on a whole different mindset. They were actually programmed. They were actually trying to change. And thanks to their wisdom, they kind of told me like, hey, there is a way, Kevin, that you can put the criminality behind you and reform. And that's when I started really looking at this. This was in about 2014. And I started really looking at myself and saying, well, crime really brought me here. Maybe I should stop. And that's where I began involving myself more and more over the years in just positive programming. And since then, which is about 11 years now, I've actually have participated and achieved over 200 documented programs, self-help groups, therapeutic groups, college classes.
That's amazing. So you must have gotten to a point as you were going through your programs and gaining your certificates where your attitude changed from I'm doing this to please the man to I'm doing this to please Kevin and to advance Kevin's life.
Yes, and so that was in 2016 when I was starting to work on my associate's degree. And I took a class called Early Childhood Education. And the final assignment was writing a 15-page autobiography. And in doing so, what I realized was I wasn't born a criminal. I was actually a very helpful and altruistic child. And for example, when I was 8 years old, I didn't like being bullied at school. I had a stutter, a speech impediment, and I was just a small kid. And so I would spend my lunches and my recess and after school going to the school that was adjacent to us, which was a school for special needs children. And I would spend my time helping them with their homework, pushing them around if they were in wheelchairs, playing with them. And that brought me a lot of fulfillment. And then that's when I was writing this autobiography for that class, I realized that's who I really am.
So you got to see yourself in a different light that you hadn't looked at before.
Yes, it was a part of myself that I tried to suppress.
Well, I think that's something about education that we don't realize until we're there. As we start learning more about the world around us, we learn more about ourselves and our part in it. And a lot of times, the piece that we're playing is not being, we're not making the decisions. We're being molded and manipulated by all those things around us, our environment that we live in, whether it's our family, our schools, our neighborhoods, the bullies, all those things that come in. And then we end up with a bad self attitude about ourselves. I must be bad because they treat me this way. I must be bad because I got hollered at for doing something, not because you were a child. And that's one thing I think so many people grow up feeling, I'm a bad child. No, children aren't bad. Life happens to them that affects them, that makes them make poor decisions. That's what happens. So I'm so glad you got to that point in life where you had that you recognize that in yourself, because that's the first step, is we have to believe in ourselves.
Yes, and I definitely agree with you on that. And I've realized something over all the years of all my studies and working with trauma. And I've done a lot of studies when it comes to trauma. And I think that the incarcerated population is kind of almost a concentration of traumatic lives.
Yes.
And and I have shared my story with many people. And as I said earlier, the best way I can describe my upbringing was abusive and chaotic. Was that I wasn't a bad kid. I thought I was bad because of the things that were said to me.
Right.
When I reflected on my life, I was an honor student. I was in a gifted program. At the age of 13, I self-taught myself how to build web pages, and I was typing out like 102 words a minute. By the time that I was in high school, I had artwork that was displayed in museums. I was a varsity sports player, but none of these things ever met my mother's expectations. She demanded more and more and more. And when I couldn't essentially meet these unreasonable expectations of her, I would be punished in the course. And so eventually I kind of got this idea. It's like, well, why should I even try anymore?
So at what age do you think that, I hate to say the light goes off, but that's how I kind of looked at it. It seems like somebody switches that switch and it says, yeah, well, I'm going to go from this and now I don't care.
So it was between 13 to 15 for me. And if I was to replay the events of when I was 13, at the time, I'm a self-declared nerd. I enjoy reading. I enjoy doing things that aren't, hip with the cool kids. And so I was being bullied by, the local gang members and things like that because I was an honor roll student. I was participating in the student body. And so at that point, not having relationships with people at school and not having, kind of a relationship with my own family, I always kind of had this belief, as long as I can get one person to love me, I'll be okay. And I started developing a love interest with a girl in eighth grade until my mother discovered the situation and just completely went into a wild fit about it. And I remember her telling me these words, that I was ungrateful to her for all the things that she did for me, and essentially that I was the devil's child. And mind you, again, at the time, I thought I was meeting all of her demands. And so this kind of switched me off into like this rebellious state. And other circumstances came into play where, for some reason, she wanted me to become a heart surgeon, and she was dead set on that. If I spoke about any other career, she didn't want to hear it, and she wasn't going to support me. And so this was a strange time in my life where I had access to the internet, and I was 13 years old. But I was squeamish of working with the idea of, operating on people, cutting them open, and dealing with blood. So I came to a conclusion where I said, I think I need to desensitize myself in order to do this. And having access to the internet, I was able to find, just gory, disgusting videos of murders, operations, and things like that. And in the process of desensitizing myself, I started adopting these beliefs where, okay, I can get people to stop bullying me if I teach them a lesson. If I become so brutal, people will stop bullying me. And so then I started switching over from this idea of, okay, I'm going to work, I'm going to grow up to be a healthy adult, I'm going to work, I'm going to have a career, I'm going to have a life, I'm going to have an education, to say, I'm going to take the control of my life by stopping everyone else from picking on me, including my own family. So fast forward a couple years when the light switch really turned off. It was my freshman year. I was so tired of being bullied by this one individual from 6th grade all the way to 9th grade. I called him out. I said, we're going to fight after school. But at that moment, it was just like these videos that I saw on the internet and stuff like that. I remember a scene where there was like this, if I recall correctly, he was either like a warlord, and someone had trespassed on his property, and he murdered the individual to teach everyone a lesson. That was basically the message that I received from watching this video. So I told myself that day, I'm not going to fight this guy. I'm going to kill him. And this is going to teach everyone a lesson to stop picking on me. And in the after-school fight with him, I ultimately hospitalized him and nearly killed him. If it wasn't for the sake of my older brother arriving to pick me up and stopping the fight, I probably would have committed murder that day.
You probably wasn't just hitting him, you were probably hitting every other bully that you ever came across, and he was the one who was at the other end of it. Because that's what happens, you get that stuff that builds up. That's why it's so important for us to have a support system, someone we can turn to when something like that is happening, someone we can talk to and feel protected. And you obviously did not feel that.
No, and that's part of the distortions that I had. At that time, I believe I lived a cursed existence. I thought God had cursed me to this life, and unless I became the master of my own fate, my life would never, quote unquote, get better.
So how much later was it that you became incarcerated?
About 10 years, actually. So I was incarcerated in my adult life at the age of 25.
25, okay.
So other struggles that I went on through that time, Good. It wasn't the first time I had encounters with the law. And so, as I was saying earlier, I think the light switch finally turned off was when I was 16 years old. And I was being scouted as a varsity badminton player at my high school, potentially for college. And I was the captain of the team. I had a girlfriend at the time. I was an honor student. I was involved in other programs and stuff like that. And I finally reached a point where I couldn't do it anymore. I just did not have the bandwidth to continue doing this. And so, just like as my mom, my parents, and my siblings were abusive to me, I normalized abuse. I thought abuse was something that you employed against other people to control them.
Right.
And so, I committed domestic violence against my girlfriend at the time, and she ultimately separated with me. And to me, the end of the world. I thought that she was the only person that could ever love me, and I lost it. And so at 16 years old, I attempted suicide my first time. And I remember I had a bottle of Tylenol. And it was like, I think I either 100 or 50, I can't remember. But I downed the whole bottle, and I just went into a rage. I started fighting my teammates until the officers came, and I tried to fight the officers, hoping that they would shoot and end my life.
So suicide by cop.
And then from there, I was placed into a psychiatric ward for observation for 2 weeks. And while I was there, I kind of felt at peace. And what I mean by that was I was outside of my home. The abuses that I was experiencing at home weren't there. But following that, I was released back to my mother. And she was instructed by the clinicians to continue bringing me to therapy and things like that, which I never received.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
So it became a point in my life where I just kind of lost a sense of direction. And I said, okay, school is not working for me. Relationships aren't working for me. The best thing I need to do now is find out how to get out of this house. And so, fast forward a couple of years, I abandoned my scholarships, things like that, and I sought a job just so that I could leave the household. So at this point in my life, I couldn't see a future. And I sat there and mulled over what purpose do I have in life? And so the conclusions I came to was the world is a chaotic place. People are against me. Life is fleeting. So therefore, I have to figure out how to meet my wants and needs at all costs. So I abandoned my education and actually went into the field of automotive. I had my own car at the time, and I would work on my own car. So I figured, okay, this is something I can do. And so I went to night school in community college to receive some certifications in automotive. And I started working as a mechanic at the age of 17. And I kind of continued in that line, in that industry until I was 25 when I was incarcerated.
So you had so much potential had you had the right direction.
Yes, I would say so.
If you had one message to share with the people that are listening right now about either your story or about life there or giving people second chances, what would you say to them?
What I would say to the public and any of your listeners is that childhood trauma, is a hidden epidemic. It's something that I've learned over all my studies, that 1 in 10 kids are insulted or cussed at by an adult member in the household. 1 in 8 children witness a parent being hit. 1 in 4 are beaten by a family member to the point of visible injury. 1 in 4 grows up knowing an addict, and 1 in 5 is sexually molested. I fit all those categories. I have been physically abused, emotionally abused, raped as a child by relatives. And these things destroyed the potential in me because I couldn't see what the meaning of existence was. If I was doing good things, yet bad things keep happening to me, then what is the point? So I lost hope. But I think that people don't realize the trauma that actually happens in children. While my story might sound severe in comparison to others, I've learned that trauma is trauma. And when left unresolved, place where trauma is concentrated is prison. So if there's a message that I could leave with everyone is be aware that trauma exists and find help either for yourself or the people that you know are experiencing trauma.
That's a really good point to make, because I think that if you were to do a survey in the prisons, that I would say a good 85 to 90% of everyone there had some severe trauma before they ended up in prison. And then you add all the other levels of trauma before they enter prison, they're in jail, the court experience, the treatment of society, going into prison, the whole foreignness of it all, because as you know, it's entering another world. And then we
Yes.
add another level of trauma, and then they're traumatized by the experience of incarceration, and we release people back to the streets expecting them to be successful without addressing that. And I think that's where it's so important to have education in prison, because the more we learn, the more we can address those personal issues that may be, I hate to use the word our faults, but the areas that we need to improve in. So, well,
I agree with you on that.
are there any changes that you'd like to see in the California prison system? Anything that you think needs changing, or something that they could add?
Well, I believe that California's model is very progressive. There's a lot of avenues for rehabilitation and restorative justice and leniency. It's just that I don't think that it's exercised well, even though the mechanisms are in place. And I'll give you one example, and that would be me. At the former institution that I used to be at, there was 2 times I was recommended for resentencing to try to reduce my prison term. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't meet one of the requisites, which was having 10 years of time within the California Department of Corrections at 8.5 years and 9.5 years. Since coming to Corcoran, I have not only grown, I've participated in more programs, have helped started a nonprofit organization with, Mark, and things like that. And I haven't seen the recognition that I received at the other institution. And so there's kind of a lack of uniformity within the department.
Do you think if there was, I don't want to say a reward system, because everyone says, oh, don't reward people in prison. But do you think that people progress as far as either education, programming, their behavior, even those that just continually improve on their behavior? Do you think that they should have more opportunities as they improve? In other words, should they have more freedoms, like freedom of movement, more rec time, maybe allowed to do special programming?
So I think that system is already in place here in California. Again, I just don't think it's well oiled. And I'll give you an example with my co-defendant, who is actually my older brother. He was sentenced to 25 years to life, but in August of this year, he was commuted by Governor Newsom to 15 years to life and will be going to his board hearing in February. And that is because he did engage in positive programming, became a mentor.
Do you think maybe it's because there's so many people incarcerated in California that there's, I hate to say, not enough to go around?
I think it kind of is. So San Quentin Prison now is a quote-unquote rehabilitation center. And most of the funding, programs, and recognition goes to that institution. So there's a lot more, news through the grapevine of individuals being commuted, being resentenced in a prison such as San Quentin rather than, here at Corcoran.
Well, Kevin, I'm really glad we've had a chance to talk because I think it's really important for people to understand that people change. And it is important that we give people second chances and sometimes third and fourth chances. I think that what you've been doing is really commendable. I think that Mark was right, that you have definitely tried hard to do a lot to improve your life, but also the lives of other people by helping them with education. It's, really some important stuff that you're doing. Is there anything that you would like to mention before we finish up? Did I forget anything?
Yes, I think there's one thing that I would like to address is the incarcerated population in general. Um, since I was saying earlier how so many of us have experienced trauma, I think that we're actually well prepared to navigate prison. The way I've reframed perspective is the trauma that I endured as a child is nothing in comparison to is the prisons that I'm sorry, the trauma that I've experienced in prison pale in comparison to those that I've experienced as a child. The ones I experienced as a child were much worse. So I'm actually able to withstand anything that happens here in prison very easily. And once I came to that perspective shift, it was easy then to realize, hey, I can put myself back into school. I can become educated. I can do these programs. I can help other people. And so it was just a reframing of perspective. And what I offer today, I think, is hope. I want people to know that even though I was sentenced to 52 years to life, and when I first came in, I would have not gone to a parole board until I was in my mid-70s. Today, there's a potential I could be going to parole board when I turn 50. Is that never lose sight of what's ahead. Find meaning, and what I mean by that is set goals and achieve them while incarcerated. And eventually, I think what happens over time is that people start recognizing genuine change. And then where I'm fortunate today is that I have people advocating for leniency, for my leniency. And I think that is possible with anyone who's incarcerated to reach the place where I'm at today if they sat down and looked at their life and say, I'm a survivor. Prison is something that I could definitely survive.